Okay guys, this is it. The final division of my training camp preview, the NFC West. Let's break it down. What's going on guys? Dick's Report here, back to another video. Today we are talking about the NFC West, a division that holds the Super Bowl runner-up and probably the biggest retirement from the offseason. Let's jump right in. Okay. I know I did not do a draft review, and the reason was I just wasn't comfortable doing one this year, but if I did do one, I would have had Arizona as my favorite draft from the 2024 draft. And the reason, they had so many picks, particularly in those first 3 rounds, and I think they used those picks wisely. While I don't think they had the best draft, I think they had the most productive draft, because they had a lot of picks, and like I said, I think they used them correctly. You get Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th overall pick, the guy that I had as the #1 prospect in the draft. They get him 4th overall. They get a bona fide #1 receiver for that receiving core that just lost Marquise Brown and Rondale Moore. Kyler Murray, he's coming back from that torn ACL. Now he's fully healthy. He missed half of 2023, recovering from that. Now he's ready for a rebound. And that's why you get Marvin Harrison Jr. They did not have a #1 receiver in that receiving core. Now with Marvin Harrison Jr., those two can hopefully get in sync early on and start making defenses scratch their heads. And then with their second first-round pick, you get Darius Robinson, a guy that I think is the most versatile defensive lineman in that draft. I think you can place him anywhere on the defensive line. He's going to succeed. You're going to have a lot of fun trying to figure out where to best put him in certain situations. Jonathan Gannon and his coaching staff, hopefully they can get the Cardinals moving in the right direction. And again, with the other picks that they used, I think they got guys that, 1, can contribute right away, and 2, can be pieces for the future. That's what the Cardinals need to figure out. They need to figure out who's going to be for the future and who's probably not going to be around after this season. For the Cardinals, they move in the right direction. We could see them back in the playoffs sooner rather than later. Wow. Aaron Donald has retired. That is a big hole to fill. Aaron Donald, he was probably the most feared defensive player that we have seen in a long time. This guy was just so good, so dominant, and now he's gone. And again, it's a big hole to fill, but they drafted Jared Verse and Braden Fisk in the first 2 rounds of the draft, and I am hoping that nobody is expecting them to fill that void, because there's never going to be another Aaron Donald. Just have these two play like Verse and Frisk, and there will be good players in the NFL. And yeah, it's going to be a big hole to fill, but there's still talent on this team. Even after they traded Jalen Ramsey before 2023, there's still some talent on this team. But man, again, it's just a big hole to fill. And with Matthew Stafford, you do have to wonder how much longer he's going to be the quarterback, because he is getting up there in age. And Sean McVay and that coaching staff, I think they do have to be aware he's not going to be there forever. In fact, we don't even know how much longer Sean McVay's going to be there. Really, the big question for me is, what is going to be the Rams' ceiling? Again, I know they have talent on this team, but how far can they really go with not having Aaron Donald anymore and with Matthew Stafford starting to get up there in age? They were a surprise playoff team last year. But again, you have to wonder, can they repeat that in 2024? Well, that remains to be seen. San Francisco, you were that close to a Super Bowl. That close. But you were just outdone by overthinking it. There's no other way to put it. You overthought it. Now, you lost a lot of depth on the defensive line, and I had mentioned this in the free agency video. Eric Armstead was cut, Chase Young is gone, so is Cleveland Farrell, and a few others on that defensive line that weren't necessarily starters, but that was depth. And on a defensive line, if you don't have great depth, you do not have a great defensive line. So hopefully they were able to replace that depth. Nick Bosa is still Nick Bosa. He is one of the best players in the NFL. But man, did they lose a lot of depth. Javon Hargrave, he's still a really good player on the defensive line as well. So they still have Pro Bowl players on that defensive line. But again, you don't have the depth. It doesn't really matter. And they have a big question mark at wide receiver. Not because they don't have the depth, but because Brandon Ayuk has asked for a trade. Just today, he has asked for a trade because he has not had a long-term deal done. I don't know how much longer he's going to be a 49er. Are they going to have him for this entire season, or are they going to trade him? They may trade him before the season even starts. We don't know. Ricky Pearsall was drafted in the first round to essentially replace him, but how soon is that going to happen? That's the biggest question in that room. And really the biggest question for the 49ers is, are they going to have a Super Bowl hangover? We know the history behind the Super Bowl runner-ups. It's not particularly great, especially the last time the 49ers were the Super Bowl runner-ups. They did not have a great season, and they got hit with a lot of injuries. Hopefully, they're going to avoid that this year, but who knows? And really, for Brock Purdy, I mean, he already took that next step, but is there another step that he could take? I don't know. He's already proven that he is one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. He's going to be due for a contract extension once that is coming up. For the 49ers, they still have a window, but can they get the ultimate prize? Pete Carroll is gone. He's no longer the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He had been there since 2009 and led them to multiple winning seasons, multiple division titles, Legion of Boom. 2 times went to the Super Bowl and won one of those appearances. He did a lot of great things in Seattle, but it was time to move on. Now, Mike Macdonald takes over. And Mike Macdonald, he just had a tremendous season as a defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. And they're hoping he can bring that intensity back to Seattle that they really haven't seen since the Legion of Boom. But it all starts in the safety position, because they lost both of their safeties. Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, they're both gone. We'll see what happens with them. We'll see if they're able to replace them. But really, it's also what's going to happen at quarterback. Geno Smith was hurt, and he was at times inconsistent last year. Drew Lock is no longer there as the backup. This is really going to be interesting what happens at this position. If Geno Smith can play more like 2022 Geno Smith and not 2023, Seattle, they could sneak into a wildcard spot. It's going to be tough to fight for this division because I think the 49ers are still clearly the best team in the NFC West. But man, with Seattle, if they can come together as a team, if Mike Macdonald turns out to be as good as he was as a defensive coordinator last year, I think they could definitely make a wildcard appearance. But the problem is, I just don't know what to expect from them until the season starts. They're just one of those teams where I want to see how they play the first few weeks before I really start to think how I could expect this team to end the 2024 regular season. Alright guys, those are my thoughts on the NFC West teams. And like I said, this was the last training camp preview, so we are done and we're already seeing players report to training camp. As for my next few videos, well, I got a few trade videos to talk about. And I don't mean trades that I think are going to happen, like the T. Higgins trade or Brandon Ayuk. I mean some of the best, some of the worst, and somewhere in between. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're just going to have to find out.